Rec in NBA 2K has changed a lot. From the early days of crew mode to 2K15's Jordan Rec Center, which brought multiple courts, got next spots, and players hooping in street clothes. All the way to the recent games to where we have generic uniforms, courts surrounded by AIs in the stands, and listening to a random teammate in game chat yell like he's Coach Carter.
I called a timeout to stop that takeover going up. What did you call it for? Cause now we ain't got none. Trash ass.
Today, we're looking back at Rec from where it began to what we now know it as today.
I'm open. Look, I'm open.
Bruh.
I should not have to stand for the ball. I'm on the point guard and I'm open, bro.
First up, we got 2K10 and 2K11. In 2K10 and 2K11, they had crew mode, and crew laid the foundation for everything that Rec would eventually become. For the first time, you could take your MyPlayer online, team up with friends, and play full 5-on-5 games. And these games had full presentation and commentary. This wasn't just another game mode, it instantly became one of the most beloved modes of NBA 2K ever. Playing with your MyPlayer in an NBA arena, hearing commentary, and experiencing all of that while playing with your friends made it feel like nothing players had ever touched before. There was no rep, no rewards, and no VC. The only thing you and your crew cared about was your spot on the leaderboard. Crew sadly only lasted 2 years, and if we're being honest, it's really only remembered for 2K11 because the servers for this mode in 2K10 barely even worked. But either way, it instantly became one of the best modes in 2K history, and it's still missed to this day. And that leads us in to 2K12 and 2K13. After 2K11, crew was sadly removed. And in 2K12, I hope you liked playing offline, because they straight up didn't give you anything to play online with your MyPlayer. You were stuck grinding offline just for the love of the game. Then in 2K13, they at least gave us online blacktop. You could finally bring your MyPlayer online again, but it was only 3v3 on a street court. Still no online 5v5 mode with your MyPlayer, and still no crew. These were the years where 2K added VC and was trying to find its identity, but for players who had a chance to play crew mode, this was still disappointing, and it felt like 2K had completely forgotten about the mode. And that brings us to 2K14. On 2K14 Next Gen, 2K was focused on building the foundation of one of the biggest modes in the game, being My Park. That meant outside of the 5v5 court in the park, there was no rec and no 5v5 online MyPlayer mode. But on current gen, 2K technically brought back crew mode, or at least they made it seem like they did.
Crew mode is back in NBA 2K14.
This time they called it Crews, and real fans knew right away this was nothing like the original. That was unless 2K slid them a paycheck to say otherwise. And what they gave us was basically 2K13's online blacktop. But this time, they added a 5v5 version as well, so you could play 3v3 or 5v5. And on top of that, they added a crew leaderboard. But still, there was no commentary team, no NBA arenas, just a regular blacktop court. It looked and felt nothing like the legendary crew mode we remembered. And that leads us to the revival, 2K15. 2K15 was a weird year for rec and crew fans, because it really depended on what console you were playing on. On current gen, they actually brought back the legit crew mode this time, with full commentary, NBA arenas, and everything fans loved about the version in 2K11 outside of the mods. The problem was, by this point, most of the player base had already moved on to the next gen. Xbox 360 and PS3 just weren't the focus anymore. So even though crew was finally back, players couldn't fully enjoy it because the community wasn't there. And this got really overshadowed because on next gen, we got another beloved mode, the Jordan Rec Center. You can now play a 5-on-5 pickup game in a massive gym with got next spots and players running around in street clothes, which sounds kind of stupid now, but it was awesome at the time. Being able to play what felt like an actual NBA game versus online players in a rec gym while seeing other games going on at the same time was just something we've never had before. And another thing that kept players hooked on next gen was the brand new rep system. You weren't just playing games, you were grinding for top rep. On current gen, crew was back, but you were basically just playing for fun. There weren't as many players on the game, so the leaderboard really didn't matter as much. But on next gen, if you were top rep and you were repping a mascot, it was an accomplishment you'll never forget. The original Jordan Rec Center is still missed to this day, and it was the start and foundation of what rec would eventually become. And that brings us to one of the greatest ever, 2K16. In 2K16, rec as we knew it was gone, and in its place came Pro-Am. This was the debut of custom jerseys, custom courts, and official leaderboards, the new competitive side of 2K. But 2K also added something called Walk-On. This was basically the rec replacement. If you had 3 players in in Pro-Am, you could run a game with 2 AIs, or you could still jump into Walk-On, which was basically Rec, and get 5-on-5 games with your My Player. This mode was okay, but it wasn't remembered as much this year because Park was so much fun, and the rep grind made it one of the best we've ever seen. Every single game counted towards your rep, whether you were in Park or Walk-On, which made Walk-On not just a Rec-style mode, but an important part of the grind itself. It used the same Jordan Rec Center gym from 2K15, but it felt like a censored version of it. No got next spots, no street clothes, just generic uniforms and matchmaking. And once again, many players were left disappointed because 2K felt like they had once again downgraded a mode that was almost perfect in their eyes.
Put Vic on the phone!
And that brings us to 2K17. In 2K17, Pro-Am really took over. This was the year 2K went all in on the competitive side of 5v5 basketball. Walk-On was still there as a rec replacement, and it was great for the rep grind, but it almost felt like an afterthought. You loaded straight into games with generic uniforms, and the atmosphere of people surrounding the courts and waiting on the got next spots was gone. Gameplay-wise, it was still fun, and was still rec at its core. 5-on-5 online games with your My Player, but the atmosphere was stripped away. And although it might sound stupid now, having no got next spots and not being able to wear street clothes made a lot of people feel like 2K took away all the things that made this mode so memorable.
He could be a spy if he wanted to.
Then 2K decided to release one of their worst games ever, 2K18. In 2K18, ruining Park by introducing the neighborhood wasn't enough for 2K. They also found a way to completely bury rec. I mean, how many of you think of playing Walk-On Pro-Am when you hear of 2K18? If you didn't have a full team, you were left on the Walk-On Pro-Am again. Same as 2K17, generic uniforms and an overall boring experience. And instead of seeing other courts playing around you at the same time, you were in an isolated gym. No more rec center vibe at all. And to make it even worse, 2K replaced the rep grind with the Road to 99 system. Every game was just about inching closer to your overall being higher. And that honestly took away the fun from repping up in Rec or Park and made the grind feel slower and less rewarding. Rec still existed in the gameplay, but in 2K18, it was buried so deep under the neighborhood that most players either didn't play it or stopped playing because they almost fell asleep after about the 3rd game.
Vinny. Did Vinny fall asleep? I think Vinny's asleep.
And that leads us into 2K19. In 2K19, 2K finally stopped trying to force feed us Walk-On Pro-Am and listened by adding the Jordan Rec Center back. And although you didn't have the street clothes or got next anymore, honestly, we were just so sick of Pro-Am Walk-On at this point that we shut up and played. The big gym atmosphere was back. Multiple courts were running and the rec finally had life again. The main issue though was that even though it was more fun, the grind was still feeling stale because 2K kept the Road to 99. And that kept every single reward you'd grind for hidden behind VC. 2K19 gave us the return that many players had been waiting on since 2K15, and although it wasn't the same thing at all, it was still so much better than what we had the past few years. Then we got the COVID year with 2K20. By 2K20, the Jordan Rec Center had officially cemented itself as the standard for 5-on-5 basketball in 2K. Rec wasn't just back, it was here to stay. You still didn't have the street clothes or got next spot, and at this point it was pretty clear 2K wasn't adding them back. But that was honestly okay, because the rec door was constantly packed every day, the matchmaking was quick, and the rec became the go-to mode if you wanted a full game that actually felt rewarding. And on top of that, the My Rep system was finally back, which made the grind feel more worth it again. For the first time in years, every game actually felt like it meant something, and it gave you an incentive to keep playing the game. It doesn't seem like a huge difference on the surface, but the fact that rec was actually enjoyable again was all that really mattered. And rep was the small touch that the mode needed, and it gave life back to a mode that was starting to die. Then 2K brought us to the city with 2K21. In 2K21, the big focus on next gen was the introduction of the city. But inside all the hype, rec stayed the same. It was copy and pasted straight from 2K20. But this year, it was just put inside of a fancy building in the city. And the only real difference is you actually walked into the building and then into the locker room to start the matchmaking. Maybe 2K thought it was cool, but really, it just added to the process of actually playing a game. It was the same gym, same uniforms, and same structure. It wasn't terrible, and we all still enjoyed the mode itself, but the gameplay was mid, and the city honestly just sucked. But it also made us realize 2K had their priorities completely wrong. Instead of putting effort into modes we actually enjoyed, they were really just focused on adding to the city and finding more ways to make us buy VC. 2K21 introduced the city, but inside the city, rec stayed exactly the same. And that brings us in to 2K22. 2K22 brought us right back into another huge city, and the rec once again stayed exactly the same, although the layout was basically a another copy and paste feature and was starting to feel old, the mode itself was still enjoyable, especially in the beginning before 2K patched all of the cheese. But once those patches hit, the gameplay went right back to being slow and boring, and that's when people started falling off of the game again. The problem was after a few games, you started to wonder why you were even grinding or playing in the first place. Just like every year, I mean, it was still fun with friends until you went up against a squad who was running its own defense, but this was also the year 2K introduced the Season Pass, and that was the main grinding system. And like I said, outside of running with your friends, Rec got stale quick because there was no real incentive to keep playing.
Michael Jordan didn't have no YouTube channel.
That brings us to when things started to change again, 2K23. In 2K23, things changed a little bit. Instead of classic Rec Center layout with multiple games happening at once, 2K moved the Rec into the version we now know today, a single basketball gym with AI crowd surrounding the court. It looked cleaner and more realistic, but it also felt emptier. That unique vibe of seeing other games running around you was gone. And even with the new layout, the gameplay itself just still wasn't really enjoyable, and the grind wasn't rewarding. The mode started to just fade further and further into the background. 2K23 overall was a pretty mid game, but they made the Rec layout what it now is today.
Y'all out here tripping over one game? Please.
And that brings us into more changes. 2K24. 2K24 kept the same Rec layout as 23, the single basketball gym with an AI crowd. The big change this year wasn't the look of the mode, it was how you got into games. For the first time ever, 2K added a no squads door. If you didn't have a team, you could walk into this door and it would guarantee you'd be matched with other solo players. It was a huge win for casuals who were tired of being thrown into games against full squads, but this also created a new problem. If you wanted to just play with one or two friends, you had to go through the squads door. And that honestly is usually a death sentence, because you either get matched up against full squads running a zone all game, or you're stuck with random teammates who just play buddy ball the whole game. Or even worse, you could get an AI teammate who just gets cooked all game. Outside of that, it was the same slow gameplay with no real reason to grind for underwhelming rewards. The no squads door helped solo players have more fun, but the changes still weren't enough to bring back the energy that the mode used to have.
Put Vic on the phone.
And that brings us to the more recent games with 2K25. By the time 2K25 dropped, Rec felt like it was on cruise control. The mode looked exactly the same like it had the past 2 years. The same type of basketball gym with an AI crowd and the same generic feel every time you loaded in. The difference this year was that even though the game itself wasn't great, it was at least more playable compared to the last couple years. And because of that, the mode actually got played a lot more than it had in recent years. And outside of the cap breakers, the rewards just really felt underwhelming. Rec will always be a beloved mode, especially with friends, but by 2K25, although it was fun at times, it just wasn't the same version fans fell in love with many years ago. And that brings us to the most recent game, 2K26. In 2K26, Rec is still the standard 5-on-5 mode for your MyPlayer Online. The layout is still the same basketball gym that was introduced back in 2K23, and the formula hasn't really changed. Similar uniforms, same crowd, and same setup. The biggest change this year hasn't been the look of the Rec, but the gameplay around it. With new builds dominating and the meta shifting to taller players, Rec has become the place where you really see how broken or balanced the game actually is. The grind is still tied to rep and seasons, but with some of the other rewarding challenges as well, Rec continues to be one of the most played modes in 2K26. And that's simply because nothing else offers the same 5-on-5 experience. And the biggest thing I've noticed so far is that people aren't giving up on 2K26 as quickly as past games. Normally players hype it up for a week and then just stop playing. And even with the broken 7-4 builds who can shoot over everyone and still be considered open, the game itself is fun. They added a lot of small but interesting elements that actually improve the overall experience, and while the microtransactions still hurt the game tremendously, it's surprisingly enjoyable this year so far.
It's the UGG sauce. I got your corner. I seen you, bro. What the
And that is the history of Rec. From the foundation with unforgettable memories and crew, to wearing street clothes and got necks in 2K15's Jordan Rec Center, to having to wear mustard yellow jerseys in the Pro-Am walk-on, to wearing jerseys that change every season in the Rec that we now know today. Now, most importantly, what year do you guys think was the most enjoyable for Rec? Me personally, I enjoyed every single year. It's pretty consistent, and no matter what, I usually have fun, but I have to say, I do miss the old layout. But thank you guys for watching. I really appreciate all the support. F the haters, and remember, stay saucy.
Ever since I can remember, I've been popping my collar,
Should people buy VC in 2K26?
Real men spend money on the game, and I'm a real man.